So I want to start today by asking you a question. And I want you to genuinely analyze your own history for a moment. Which woman has had the greatest impact on your career?
That is a big question to start with.
It is, right. Because when you hear that prompt, your mind might immediately index the usual suspects. You might think of a famous historical trailblazer.
Or a prominent academic, or maybe one of those powerhouse CEOs who command the covers of global business magazines.
Exactly. We tend to think of these massive public figures. But for today's deep dive, we are going to look much closer to home.
Because when we strip away the corporate mythology and actually look at the sociological data, the answer for a staggering number of professionals is both unexpected and profoundly intimate. We are talking about our mothers.
Right. Today, our source material is drawn from the personal and analytical notes of a creator who publishes under the name OscarAI. And you can find his broader analysis on X under the handle at OscarBP1. What makes these notes so compelling is how they take a concept that usually lives in the realm of, sentimental greeting cards and subjects it to really rigorous analysis. OscarAI weaves his own observations together with hard scientific data to demonstrate that maternal influence on our professional lives is a structural, quantifiable reality.
And the mission for this deep dive is to unpack the specific sociological and psychological mechanisms driving that reality. We're going to explore why mothers consistently function as the most influential professional mentors we encounter.
Yeah, we're not just talking about warm feelings here.
Not at all. We will look at how that maternal influence fundamentally shapes a person's resilience, establishes their baseline emotional intelligence, and fundamentally alters their long-term career trajectory. We are moving far beyond the baseline concept of maternal care and looking directly at executive functioning and leadership development.
So let's unpack the hard data first. Because I think when someone claims their mother as their most significant career influence, it is remarkably easy to dismiss that as a polite, socially acceptable platitude.
Oh, absolutely. It sounds like something you just say at an awards ceremony.
Right, but OscarAI brings the receipts. He points directly to a massive 2018 study out of Harvard Business School conducted by Kathleen McGinn and her colleagues.
And the sheer scale of the McGinn study forces us to take this seriously. We are looking at an analysis of data from over 50,000 families.
50,000, that is huge.
50,000 spanning 25 different countries. This is a global, multi-generational look at the economic and professional impact of working mothers, which means the researchers were able to control for a vast array of socioeconomic and cultural variables.
Which is so important for a study like this.
Exactly. And the statistics they uncovered regarding the daughters of working mothers, they disrupt a lot of traditional narratives.
The numbers are incredibly striking. According to the Harvard data, daughters who grew up with mothers who worked outside the home are 21% more likely to be employed themselves. But the data point that really stands out to me is that these same daughters are 29% more likely to supervise others in their roles, and they earn significantly more money on average than the daughters of stay-at-home mothers.
That 29% jump in supervisory roles is a massive statistical anomaly. It completely redefines how we should view the return on investment of a mother's invisible labor.
Because supervising others isn't just about showing up.
No, it requires a highly complex set of skills. You need conflict resolution, resource allocation, strategic planning, emotional regulation. The data suggests these daughters aren't just learning these skills in an MBA program later in life. They are observing them be modeled in real time by mothers who are navigating the friction between professional demands and household logistics.
What really struck me in the Harvard data wasn't just that bump for daughters, but how the influence manifested in the sons.
Yeah, that part is fascinating.
Right. The study shows the impact on boys is equally profound, though it appears in a different metric. So the sons aren't necessarily earning a higher premium, but they absorb highly egalitarian attitudes from a young age.
They grow up observing a much more balanced division of labor.
Exactly. And as a result, they are far more likely to choose partners who also work. Furthermore, these sons spend significantly more time on household chores and childcare themselves.
Which totally disrupts that old traditional narrative of career enablement. A mother who balances multiple roles, whether that involves a formal corporate career, part-time work, or managing the incredibly complex logistics of a household, she provides a living, breathing model of functional stamina.
Functional stamina. I love that phrase.
It's so accurate, though. She teaches her children through sustained action that work and family are not mutually exclusive enemies. Even more crucially, she models the reality that a career is built on daily invisible
Like
effort.
the unglamorous stuff.
Exactly. It is the routine labor that ultimately sustains a professional trajectory, far more than the occasional public applause or formal promotion.
And that concept of daily invisible effort perfectly bridges the gap between the domestic sphere and the corporate reality, because a successful career is rarely a montage of high-profile victories.
It's usually a lot of emails and putting out fires.
Yes, it is waking up, managing a crisis, executing routine tasks, and having the capacity to do it all again the next morning. And the Oscar AI notes transition into another piece of research that illustrates this beautifully, utilizing data from the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development.
The NICHD data. This shifts our focus from simple employment status to the actual psychological environment the mother engineers. This research is particularly compelling because it is longitudinal.
They track them over a long period.
Decades, actually. By tracking these children over decades, researchers can observe exactly how specific maternal variables map to advanced executive functioning in adulthood.
And they looked specifically at mothers who possessed work autonomy, right? So mothers who had a degree of control and independence over how they managed their professional and domestic responsibilities.
Right.
And the longitudinal data revealed that children raised by mothers with high work autonomy develop demonstrably better adaptive skills, and they exhibit far fewer long-term behavioral problems.
The connection between a mother's work autonomy and a child's adaptive skills is rooted deeply in observational learning. These children are getting a front row seat to masterful stress
They are
management.
watching it happen every single day.
Exactly. They watch their mother context switch rapidly between a professional phone call and a household emergency. They observe her encounter an unpredictable obstacle, pivot her strategy, and persevere without a catastrophic breakdown. In essence, the kitchen table functions as the original masterclass in advanced executive functioning.
Oscar AI includes a quote from his own mother in his notes that I think perfectly encapsulates this transfer of executive functioning. He recalls her telling him, "If you fall, get up and keep going, because life waits for no one."
That is a powerful line.
If you presented that exact phrase on a stark white slide at a Fortune 500 leadership retreat, corporate executives would be taking furious notes. It is literally a masterclass in resilience distilled into a single sentence.
And it connects seamlessly to the modern discourse surrounding effective leadership. Consider the soft skills that are currently viewed as solid gold in corporate environments today.
Patience, empathy, active listening.
Yes, the ability to accurately read the emotional temperature of a room and the capacity to regulate your own nervous system while helping your team regulate theirs. The modern corporate world is starved for emotional intelligence. And for a vast majority of the workforce, their first, most intensive, and most effective training in EQ was conducted by their mothers.
Because you certainly don't learn genuine empathy from a quarterly earnings spreadsheet.
No, definitely not.
You learn it from someone who sat with you during a moment of intense frustration, helped you identify the emotion, and guided you through processing it. And this brings us to another major theme in the source material, which is the psychological fuel of unconditional belief and how it structurally alters a professional's trajectory.
The notes synthesize decades of meta-analyses in vocational psychology, pointing to a highly specific mechanism here. The data confirms that effective emotional support from parents, with a pronounced emphasis on the mother's role, is a massive predictor of vocational maturity.
Vocational maturity being the alignment of knowing what you are intrinsically suited to do and possessing the psychological fortitude to actually pursue it, regardless of external friction.
Exactly. It's the mechanism that drives career self-efficacy. In psychological literature, self-efficacy is a person's fundamental belief in their own capacity to execute the behaviors necessary to achieve specific performance goals.
It's knowing you can actually do the thing.
Right. It is the deep-seated conviction that you actually have what it takes to survive and succeed in your chosen arena. The data proves that this level of self-efficacy doesn't spontaneously generate in a vacuum. It is heavily subsidized by the emotional infrastructure provided during early development.
And this is where Oscar AI's synthesis of academic literature and personal reality really shines. We can read endless textbooks about the mechanics of self-efficacy, but it ultimately boils down to the reality of the lived experience. It is the structural power of a mother looking you in the eye and stating, "You can do it," and repeating that phrase even when you fail spectacularly 17 times in a row.
The repetition is key.
Because when you are exposed to that level of relentless repetition, It ceases to be an external voice.
Yeah.
It physically rewires your cognitive approach to failure until her voice becomes your internal fuel.
And that internal fuel is precisely what psychologists are measuring when they evaluate career self-efficacy. It becomes the default inner monologue that activates the moment a professional crisis hits.
OscarAI grounds all this high-level data in a personal anecdote that just strips away the academic jargon. He writes that his mother wasn't a rocket scientist. She wasn't a CEO of a multinational conglomerate. She managed the house, she executed an incredible amount of invisible labor, and she never stopped believing in his capacity to succeed, especially in the moments when his own self-belief completely evaporated.
Which is when it matters most.
Right. He notes that even today, whenever he hits a professional wall and the logical move seems to be giving up, he remembers her telling him, "Tomorrow's another day." That simple, profound phrase is the mechanism that forces him to keep pushing.
This narrative really forces us to reevaluate the modern obsession with grit. We see grit, that combination of passion and sustained persistence, marketed as something you can acquire through a weekend seminar or an intensive online course or a highly optimized corporate mentorship program.
Like it's a software app that you can just install.
Exactly. But what OscarAI's notes highlight is that the most durable form of grit is etched into a person's psyche by consistent, unconditional belief. Consider the different incentive structures here. A corporate mentor invests in you primarily because of your potential output and how it reflects on the organization.
Right, there's a business case for it.
But a mother invests in you because of who you are. That fundamental difference in motivation creates a structurally different, infinitely more resilient quality of endurance within the individual.
The motivation behind the support completely changes how deeply we internalize the lesson. However, the source material takes a very critical pivot here. If we only focus on the empowering data, the emotional intelligence, and the unconditional support, we risk painting a flawless, highly sanitized picture of the maternal dynamic.
Acknowledging the friction is vital to understanding the complete architecture of maternal influence. The source notes make it explicitly clear that this dynamic is fraught with immense challenges. Refusing to analyze the negative externalities of this relationship means we are only looking at half the data.
Absolutely. And one of the most compelling concepts the author introduces is the superhero syndrome, which I suspect will resonate deeply with anyone listening right now.
Oh, definitely.
It is a psychological trap where we idealize our mothers to such an extreme degree. We constantly focus on the sacrifices they made, the late nights they endured, and the personal ambitions they shelved so we could access better opportunities. But that generates a highly toxic byproduct. We end up carrying an intense, crushing guilt if we fail to achieve a level of professional success that we deem mathematically worthy of her sacrifices.
It transforms career progression from a journey of personal fulfillment into a mechanism for debt repayment.
Debt repayment, wow.
Yeah. When a child internalizes the narrative that their mother forfeited her own aspirations to fund theirs, it alters their risk profile entirely. This can lead to rampant burnout and crippling anxiety. A professional might avoid taking a necessary entrepreneurial risk because the thought of failing feels like they are actively squandering their mother's life's work.
They can't afford to fail because the stakes are too personal.
Exactly. Or on the flip side, they might chain themselves to a prestigious, high-paying career path that they fundamentally despise simply to justify the mother's historical double shifts.
And the challenges don't exclusively originate from the child's internal guilt either. The source material also unpacks the immense pressure generated by the mothers themselves, specifically the burden of unspoken expectations. We see scenarios where mothers, whether consciously or unconsciously, project their own unfulfilled professional dreams directly onto their children.
It happens all the time.
It creates a dynamic where the child feels suffocated, forced to pursue a specific title, like becoming a doctor or a lawyer, to vicariously fulfill the mother's abandoned ambitions, regardless of the child's actual strengths or desires.
This is further complicated by the reality of the modern double shift, a struggle the author highlights as a defining feature of contemporary motherhood. We are analyzing a generation of women who are battling the relentless exhaustion of working a full day in the formal economy, only to return home to execute a full second shift of domestic labor, household management, and childcare.
The cognitive load of that double shift is staggering, and it breeds a pervasive sense of guilt within the mothers themselves, a persistent feeling that they are perpetually falling short in both the professional and domestic arenas.
The crucial insight here is that acknowledging these struggles, the crushing fatigue of the double shift, the projection of unfulfilled dreams, the toxic guilt of the superhero syndrome, none of this diminishes the mother's impact on our careers.
Right.
By refusing to idealize them as flawless, frictionless superheroes, we actually dismantle those toxic cycles of expectation. We learn to value them realistically as deeply human individuals who manage to engineer our resilience while navigating immense, often unfair, structural complexity.
The source material introduces one final layer to this complex dynamic, which is the cultural context. OscarAI specifically frames part of his analysis through the lens of Latin American culture, where these pressures are often magnified exponentially.
The cultural variable drastically alters the weight of these expectations. In many cultures, including the Latin American context highlighted in the notes, the maternal role is intensely central to the family structure. There is a deep societal reverence for the mother, but that reverence is inextricably linked to rigid, traditional expectations of absolute self-sacrifice.
So the expectations are baked into the society itself.
Precisely. The concept of marinismo, for example, glorifies the mother who endures suffering for her family. Consequently, the pressures we just analyzed, the mother's obligation to sacrifice everything, and the child's corresponding obligation to succeed as repayment, are amplified by the entire cultural apparatus.
It is an incredibly heavy crown to wear. But recognizing the sheer weight of that cultural and structural burden makes the successful transfer of resilience and executive functioning so much more impressive. So as we pull all these analytical threads together, the Harvard employment data, the longitudinal studies on work autonomy, the mechanics of career self-efficacy, and the profound friction of the superhero syndrome, what is the ultimate synthesis for you, the listener?
The data dictates a clear conclusion. Mothers play a disproportionately massive, structurally vital role in engineering our professional success. The transformative factor is not strictly binary. It isn't just about whether they worked inside or outside the home.
It's much deeper than that.
The true mechanism of influence lies in the quality of the emotional infrastructure they built, the consistency of their support, and their capacity to serve as a living, breathing model of stamina. They provide the foundational curriculum that teaches us failure is not a terminal event, but rather a routine, manageable component of any ambitious trajectory.
So the next time you hit a massive milestone in your career, whether you finally secure the promotion you've been strategizing for, or you successfully launch a complex initiative, or secure the funding to start your own enterprise, pause before you just update your resume. When you are standing there processing the victory, don't limit your focus to the new job title or the increased compensation.
Look a little deeper.
Analyze the origin of your own resilience. Take a moment to think about the woman navigating the kitchen with a cup of coffee and early morning exhaustion, who taught you the mechanics of perseverance long before you ever set foot inside a corporate office.
Understanding the origin of that internal fuel allows you to utilize it more consciously when the next inevitable professional crisis arises.
OscarAI concludes his notes with a highly pragmatic, slightly humorous call to action. He suggests that if you have the opportunity, you should reach out to her today and explicitly say, "Thank you for being my biggest professional influence." He notes that she will likely look incredibly moved, perhaps shed a tear at the acknowledgement of her invaluable labor.
And then immediately ask you to help her peel the potatoes for dinner.
Exactly. It is the perfect encapsulation of the dynamic, the profoundly structural and the deeply mundane, operating simultaneously.
Before we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final analytical prompt to consider, building on everything we've just unpacked regarding the transfer of executive functioning and unconditional belief. We have spent this time analyzing the data on how a biological or primary mother's presence shapes our career architecture.
Right.
But I want you to evaluate your own current professional network. If you did not have access to this specific kind of maternal mentor growing up, or if that foundational relationship was fractured or complicated by the frictions we discussed, how have you instinctively sought out surrogate maternal figures in your professional life to fill that exact psychological gap?
That is a great question.
And more importantly, how has that chosen family, the mentors and leaders who stepped into that role and provided that unconditional baseline, shaped your unique definition of what it actually means to succeed?
That is a phenomenal lens through which to view your own professional network. Who are the surrogate maternal mentors actively shaping your risk tolerance and resilience today? Analyze your own inner monologue, because whether that maternal fuel is biological or chosen, its impact on your trajectory is undeniable. Keep executing that daily invisible effort. Keep getting back up when the market knocks you down, and always remember who installed that resilience in you in the first place. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.